All righty. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel York. I'm the Director of the Open Government Secretariat here within the General Services Administration's Office of Government-Wide Policy. Before we get into today's session, I want to go over a few ground rules and guidelines. The session will be recorded, as you've all just saw. We're also turning on the live transcript feature. We'll be taking questions via chat, the chat feature within Zoom itself, as well as just coming off mute and asking a question. We do endeavor to answer all of your questions, but if there's anything left over in the chat, we'll try to respond via email. Beyond the discussion today, we invite people to continue to participate in the conversation by submitting written comments or questions or ideas via email. And our email address is opengovernmentsecretariat@gsa.gov. I hope someone from my team can throw that in the chat for me because it's hard to share my screen and use the chat at the same time. As you can see from the agenda slide, which I suppose I should bring up next, we're going over a few things today, the first of which are the norms of engagement. And then around 2 o'clock, we'll be jumping into a few of the NAP National Action Plan 5 commitments, specifically those around 130, 131, 142, and 130. So I think I covered most of this. All right, norms of engagements, which looks an awful lot like this. So as we begin to institutionalize the long-term support for the Open Government Secretariat work, we wanted to to exercise our co-creation muscles a little bit by drafting up a document we've called the norms of engagement. Our hope is to be able to spend the next 20 minutes or so to walk through this document, to talk through it a little bit, get your feedback on how it could be updated or edited. We did send this out back on October 20th to the listserv, but if you didn't get it, don't worry, we'll be doing some live updates here. As we begin to think through the process of putting together a future National Action Plan 6, reinvigorating our U.S. multi-stakeholder forum, continuing support for the NAP 5 public engagement sessions, it's important that we as a community begin to think through how we want to interact with each other. So this isn't for the entire federal government, right? That's really for these norms of engagement are really for these public engagement sessions and sort of a agreed upon shared values so that we can all interact with each other in a positive way. We value everyone's opinion and we want everyone to have a time to talk and be able to participate. But it does help those using assistive technologies if we, as well as the accuracy of the Zoom transcript, if we can try to speak clearly and refrain from talking over with each other, that just makes those work a little bit better. All right, and with that, we'll open it up. Feel free to come off mute or put things in the chat. What did folks think of these norms of engagement? Are these the sort of things we could agree to participate with each other on, or are there updates or changes folks would like to see? This will be a very short session and our guest speakers aren't until 2. So
I mean, if nobody's going to speak, I'll
go for it, sir. We love it.
All right. Well, I'm Josh Wilson. I run an organization byandforthepeople.org. We specialize in spotlighting government's assistance to biotech companies. And I've done over 35 public participation or public comments on animal plant health inspection services, BRS division, about the rules that they have been developing. One thing I'd love to see how you could try to put this in.
I'm afraid you're breaking up on my end, Josh.
You know, so yeah, can you hear?
Is Josh breaking up for anyone else, or is it just?
He is, yes. Josh, do you want to try turning off your video in case that helps the signal? You have low bandwidth.
Does that work any better? Can you hear me now? Yeah,
I think so. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Ah, very good. I'm not sure what you caught, but I run an organization, byandforthepeople.org, specialize in spotlighting the biotech industry and the federal government's relentless efforts to to push unvisible to the public things like they're right now on a meeting. I'd love to put into the Q&A thing is I'll put a link to a meeting on November 15th. So just in a few days, and you would be able to sign up and listen to it live. One thing you'd want to look at if you're watching that video is the exemption clause, and that allows stack traits to be released into the biosphere without any oversight or any sort of no record keeping, no oversight. And certainly there's a clause in there that says they're just trying to do scientific approaches, and that releases them from any if things happen, if there's like, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's the thing, bringing that back to the norms of engagement. How do these look given your experience with those public engagement sessions? Are there any recommended edits to this list you'd recommend? Oh,
yeah. So my letter did not make it in. I put in a very concise letter detailing my last 3 years of public meetings and how they have learned to keep the public out. In fact, you'll notice at this BRS meeting, which I'll put in the Q&A, hopefully you can share that with everybody. You will notice there's less than 15 minutes open for questions and answers. And I spend a lot of time and emails, emailing APHIS and BRS, and I get pushed to the side. And things I'd like to see is how much this tech, 50 million and counting. It's a lot of the spending bills, but it's not organized to where you can see it. You actually have to go into each funded project and then nobody talks about how it's biotech and how they're putting.
So Josh, I'm
just
looking at the rules of engagement. One of the things we were looking at was being on topic, and the topic right now is these 8 rules of engagement.
Okay,
Did you have any comments or thoughts on those specifically?
Sure. Let me read over them and I'll be more concise, and hopefully we can make some progress onto a more transparent government. So
that's the idea. Absolutely.
Now, and I appreciate it. Hopefully we can hear some other people talk, because nobody's talking. I want to hear what's on people's mind. Come on, bust out your
shell. We got Stephen, you've got your hand up. I'll pass the microphone to you, sir. Are you there, Stephen? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, we'll see if my bandwidth can handle the video. Yeah, I would say that ideally there should be some government-wide norms of engagement, standards of engagement, standard procedures that would apply in any kind of public engagement.
Okay.
Thing. I mean, what we see here, I would think could apply to any federal agency. I'd be curious to know. Be interesting to hear if a federal agency, if there was somebody out there saying, "Well, we don't want to be concise, or we don't want to be open-minded." So fair. I think the open government, and it's almost like a wicked problem, because what are the norms of engagement for deciding what the norms of engagement are?
That's right.
And, but we can start someplace, and this is someplace to start. But I would say that this should be something that's applied, that could be the model for all federal agencies, because in essence, that's what the whole open government memorandum and open government directive and the whole idea is like, gee, how do we do this all across the federal government? And so, of course, you don't want to confuse people by having every federal agency having their own flavor of public engagement, which is currently the case.
It is, absolutely. And that's a good point. So as we exercise our co-creation muscles here, right, and sort of get input from folks on this call, as limited as it might be, we are also planning on standing up an internal government community of practice for open government, which we can then help use what we develop here and disseminate out. GSA doesn't have any enforcement ability to force folks to use any particular thing, But sharing best practices and lessons learned is right in our mission wheelhouse. So your point is well taken in that respect.
And I think that would be one way to also raise the profile of the open government effort, because it's largely invisible. Tell people it's like, oh yeah, that happened like 10 years ago. Is that still around? It's like, yeah, it is. And now you're trying to get it up and running again, which is great. But I think this is exactly the wheelhouse you were talking about, is to be able to say, hey, we came up with these, and this is something that should be applied. And maybe even the open government directive out of OMB could make it a directive. If it was, here's the guidelines, and we'd really like it if you could use them, that type of guidance. When the boss says, I'd like you to do this, he or she doesn't mean if you want to. Anyway, and the other part is that I would put something in about time limits, so that it's a lot easier to, whether they want to stay on topic or not, and because sometimes you don't know where stuff goes and so forth, but it can say, this is a hard stop at 3 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever it is. And the other part
your
is,
experience, because we talked about it as a team a little bit. In your experience, what makes sense, right? Like 10 seconds isn't enough to say anything. 5 minutes is a rather a long bit of time on a potential question or comment. You tend to be a soliloquy at that point, right? Like, what is there a sweet spot in your mind what that could look like?
well, I think it kind of depends on how many people show up. So
That's
imagine
fair.
if you went to a meeting and 10 people showed up, and you had set aside 30 minutes for Q&A or public feedback or whatever you want to call it. Then you think, okay, well, that's about 3 minutes each. Let's do 2. And that way, if we have a little more time, people can follow up. Or you could do something where it's let's say 1 minute, and then everybody can do it twice. You can go around twice. If somebody has a thought, so if I have something that Kristen Robinson, I said, oh, that's right. Okay, I'm going to use my 2nd minute to add value to her statement. So, but basically it says how many people show up, how much time you got there, because and also that way you don't have and nobody gets to speak until everyone has a chance. Nobody gets to speak a second time until everyone else has a chance
I
first.
like that idea. Speak a second time.
That's what we do at our New England style town meeting here in.
So where would that be, a new one, or that be added to one of these?
You could add it.
Maybe somewhere in
That's
under
when you're
legal
starting getting,
size?
it's getting more specific. These are like guidelines, but you could actually say standards or whatever you want to, however you want to put it, but it gets more into
That's
the
what I'll do for now.
time allowed,
Just add a comment for now to remind myself, go back and look at it. So
Okay,
talk
and
about
you just
time
got my
limits.
3 minutes already, so now I'm going to let somebody else go. Thank you.
And I sorry, Kristen, let me just get this down and I'll let you just get ready, because I just want to finish typing, because otherwise I'll forget and then it'll be lost in the netherworld of my thought. So time limits we mentioned, and then the golly. Remind me here, Stephen.
Everyone gets to speak once
Right.
before
Thank
you
you.
speak again.
Okay. Great. Go ahead, Kristen.
Sure. Just a kind of quick practical point supporting what Stephen just said. I think it's tough to, nobody's sitting there with a stopwatch, right? I think it's the facilitator or the moderator's job to get a sense of, making sure everyone's had a chance to speak, that sort of thing. How long is too long? In the past, at big meetings, we've used a yellow card, red card system, which means if the yellow card is held up, you have 30 seconds to finish. It just kind of helps, so you're not having that awkward interruption thing. So just a suggestion, if you want to take it forward, kind of helps let people know that they're going on and that we need to move forward, and gives the moderator that power and discretion to keep a healthy conversation going.
That's a good idea. I hadn't heard of that. That's a cool thought. We used to, in my meetings at work, we used to use the Elmo, right? All right, everyone, let's move on. My wife had never heard of it and teased me just crazily over it. But I like the yellow card, red card idea. Thank you for that, Kristen.
Dan, it might be us looking into whether or not we have access to any Zoom add-ons that could do something like that, either like
Oh.
a warning if someone's been talking or the visible card. I don't know if we would, but I think that would be worth doing some brief research on.
Great. Thank you. So look, we even get ideas from the internal team. That's perfect. What other folks think? Are there any additions or edits to this? Obviously, actually, we did get an email to the Secretariat inbox, where we both want to encourage public participation without discouraging public participation. And so it's a fine line between facilitation and not letting folks say their piece. But are there any other edits or updates or thoughts around anything we have written here?
If you can hear me.
Hey, Josh, there you are. You're back.
Yeah, I just turned on my mic. I just wanted to touch on what the last gentleman said. If the boss says to use like one format, that's what you use. And I've noticed with APHIS BRS, every other meeting that we do, they do one meeting a year, which is coming up soon. I put the link in the chat room. But if they would use this Zoom one, this is great because everybody's reading. They've actually learned in BRS to make it so you can't talk with the other people. Really smart. And I've actually video recorded all of them. And they have, every year they come up with a better way of keeping people from communicating or keeping it to a 2-minute throw out. And then there is no Q&A. It's actually only approved questions get put up. And then you can only ask the questions. They really don't even touch base on it. They go, okay, well, we can talk about that later, but that's not the thing. We want to talk about it in the meeting room. So Zoom and this platform that you guys are using is awesome. That should
Thank
be
you. Thank you. Well, definitely we can take that to the larger community practice when we stand it up. We have done, just in all transparency, we have had meetings, either our office or at the White House that have been more webinar focused, talking at people or not allowing recordings and such. As the Secretariat, we would like to move away from that. There is some very well-received criticism of that. I think we'd like to make these as open as we can, but a lot of that depends on sort of general acceptance of the rules of rather norms of engagement, right? If we can all work together to have a successful meeting and exchange of ideas, that makes those meetings more capable, more likely, easier for everyone, frankly. But the government is included as well as civil society. So I do appreciate that.
I do have one follow-up because I did write a letter, very high attendance meetings, and I tried to attach it down here. Will it not allow a PDF to go? Because
No,
it
I'm not
says this
sure.
file cannot be.
I don't know if it's a file
This
type
is
thing or file size
PDF,
thing.
and as
Zoom may have some limits on that.
failed to size. Anyway, I thought maybe you would know. It's only a single 1-page PDF, but it does take, I actually did all the groundwork and put all the links to the meetings and the times of where it showed corruption. And I thought that might be helpful for people to read.
Yeah, I'm not a Zoom expert, I'm afraid, but there may be a size limit on the Zoom file upload. I don't think
Yeah.
that's a setting we have control over.
Yeah, no big deal. I'll try it in some different formats. Appreciate your time.
Sure. I saw there were a couple of notes in the chat. Folks like these. I'm not going to go through each one. Folks can read the chat for themselves. But yeah, great. Looks reasonable. I love that. Perfect. All right. I was honestly expecting a lot more feedback and criticism, so I don't mind that. I don't mind positive feedback. I'll take that. Was there anyone surprised of not seeing a thing, like just asking the same question in reverse? Were there things you would expect to have seen on this list that perhaps are noticeably missing?
I really like the idea of a moderator. I'll just leave that there.
So maybe something about a moderator. Okay,
When I do my meetings in my professional life, a moderator really helps keep it on track and equal time and make sure people's questions get in. I really implore you to sign up for this meeting and see what they're doing. Please, if this is your job, is to fix public engagement, then I really, really advise you to go to that link. Please, and sign up and take the time out on the 15th of this month to watch this meeting, please, just so you can see what to fix.
yeah, so we definitely want to make sure, as I mentioned, we'll be setting up a community of practice to help spread these best practices. And we'll make sure to include USDA on that as well.
Thank you. And Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, APHIS, because they're a division of USDA. So if they're not specifically looked at, then maybe they will continue to do their own thing.
All righty. Stephen, you have your hand up, sir?
Yeah, just to say that if there could be if this is a living document and that it could be referenced as 1.0 or beta or a date or something,
that's a good
so
point.
that people know that if it gets tweaked, they know which version they're looking at. So date and version. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, good call.
That's a great call. Something they never put dates on anything important.
And Dan, forgive me if I've missed this. I'm not sure. I don't think we've posted anything or a draft version of this to the website yet. So perhaps we could also do that.
Yeah, we
You know,
did
after
send
this
it out. You're right,
discussion.
Alexis. Yeah, we sent that out on October 10th to the listserv. But you're right. I don't believe it's up on the
Ye-
site itself yet.
I think we wanted to wait for this session. So, you know, once we incorporate these tweaks from the feedback, then we could have a version available on the engagement session page for anyone who didn't receive it via the mailing lists.
That's a great idea.
Try it in dog.
And then
We'll
could
make sure
I
to incorporate some of these.
propose,
Go ahead.
we also
Yeah,
take
dude, on this-
60 seconds to walk through this when we start with the main discussion at 2, just in case we have new people who join then. That way everyone knows, okay, we just discussed this. If they have additional feedback, feel free to send it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Looks like we do have another 5 minutes or so, if I'm not mistaken.
One
We
of us-
just had a question come into the chat from Suzanne, asking how would a moderator be chosen?
Oh, golly, that's a great question. I don't know if I know an answer to that. Certainly for government meetings, we might want to be a government moderator, but I definitely see a role for civil society to play that role as well. If we had sort of reinvigorated U.S. civil society or a FACA of some sort, that would make that a little bit easier because we'd have a pool to choose from without sort of playing favorites. I guess I forget who you said asked the question, Suzanne. If you have recommendations on or how we might go about doing that, I'm certainly open to hear your thoughts.
Hi, yeah, Suzanne Piotrowski. I don't necessarily, but I think it's an important question to ask, right? Because moderators really set the tone for a meeting. So it's just something to really consider, especially if it's, I mean, are they co-run meetings? Are they government run meetings? You know, who's the moderator makes a difference.
Yeah, and that could be someone from civil society. I think that's an interesting idea, actually, and one I hadn't thought of previously. So I appreciate you asking the question.
I pulled up
Why
my
would you
letter.
Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm just overviewing my letter that I was trying to send to you, but a follow-up response to people's or a follow-up to response to the rule that was actually made. You know, some sort of follow-up, maybe the itinerary and these were brought up and this is where we're going, or you know, some sort of follow-up, because I'll write
Meeting notes, you mean?
I'm sorry?
Like meeting notes?
Meeting notes or whatever happened to the rule. A lot of the stuff I work in is with rulemaking.
Okay.
And you have to actually go digging or call to get a follow-up to whatever they decided from that meeting. Because they
Oh, I
say
see.
They
I
say
think with the
that-
rulemaking stuff, some of that is actually done on regulations.gov, although I'm not super familiar with that process.
Yeah.
For folks on the line that are interested on the Open USA Gov site that manages our open government work. For each one of let's go to the engagement sessions first. For each one of the past engagement sessions, we have a meeting record, and the meeting record has the slide, the agenda, the recording. We do include like the PDF and meeting overview. In the overview doc, we include who spoke and when, who the speakers were, the resources, as well as the full attendee list, so that everyone knows who was at every public meeting, because they're public by default. So those sort of things exist, at least for my program. And certainly we could, as we stand up that community of practice, pushing out those best practices for public meetings and follow up on rules, et cetera, is something we should certainly take under consideration.
Another quick one was links to related information to be posted on like regulations.gov when they're requesting public response. You know, so like the government says, hey, we want to hear the public's opinion on this. They'll leave out all the important stuff like an environmental impact statement that should be going along with the decision, or they'll leave out, you know, a lot of the important documents that one would like to be familiar before you go over.
All righty.
Get into the meeting, so.
Right.
related
That's the sort of thing we'd
documents-
certainly pass along as a part of that federal community of practice. Stephen, I think you'll probably be the last one as we're nearing time.
Okay. Yeah, real quick. The email list serve should have also, if not these, then something. I've been reluctant to invite people or tell people about the email list, because if it's unmoderated or relatively unmoderated,
Yeah.
then people will unsubscribe because there's too much noise. So I would suggest that it be set up for moderation so that, well, anyway, I don't know who's in charge
You make
of
a
it.
really good point there, Stephen. Like,
Yeah.
so we actually have two listservs. We have a federal listserv for the .gov emails, which is moderated. There's certain, I say legal protections, but there's certain regulatory issues with moderating public discourse, right? Like free speech issues. And so we haven't really wanted to take on the role of moderating the public listserv for that reason, because it gets hairy. As we stand up a US-based civil society multi-stakeholder forum, the moderation of that listserv is something we want to turn over to them, because that way it's civil society monitoring civil society and not the government silencing voices or people or individuals. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But to your point, I understand your point in that, you know, it can become a lot depending on the topic being discussed, and, you know, reply alls and et cetera. So definitely understand your point, but also where the government is limited and for good reason. Does that make any sense?
Well, it just shows that there's a need probably for the same protocol as we were saying before across the government, to say, this is how you run a public listserv, what you can't do and don'ts.
Right.
So it's just another thing to address.
Yeah.
Asynchronous and synchronous.
So, you know, norms of engagement for a public listserv.
Yeah. Thank you.
Engagement for a public. Is it going to correct? It really should be capital L, but that's fine, whatever. All right. Well, thank you for everyone's time on this portion of the of today's session. I think we gathered a lot of important feedback from folks. Let me just pull up my thing here. Here we go. Great. So once again, thank you all. We'll do our best to integrate everything we've heard today. You saw me taking notes sort of live here as we continue to iterate on this. As Alexis mentioned, we're going to be going through this and getting it posted onto the open.usa.gov site so that folks can continue to iterate it and provide feedback. But with no further thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, we're going to move on to our main event. That is specifically the Fifth National Action Plan area of counter-corruption. So within the counter-corruption theme of the U.S. Fifth National Action Plan NAP, as you can see, there's a number of elements, focus areas, as well as underlying commitments. There's actually about 23 of them in all. But today we're just going to be focusing on these three around implementing open government components of a new government-wide strategy on countering corruption, revitalizing the U.S. National Action Plan for Responsible Business Conduct, and as well as continue to implementing the presidential initiative on democratic renewal. So those are sort of the areas we're going to be going over. A bit of sad news, unfortunately, our speaker from Department of State is not able to make it today. So we do have a couple of slides on her stuff, but unfortunately she wasn't able to make it today due to some evolving conflicts. But we do have our speaker, Abigail, from the White House National Security Council, as well as Jacob Thiessen from U.S. Department of Treasury, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. And so with that, Abigail, I hope you're on and can take it from here.
Thanks, Danielle. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Great. Thank you all for being here. It's super exciting to get to be talking about one of my favorite things in the world, OGP, and also anti-corruption, two favorite things. I'm Abigail, as Danielle said. I am a month into Director for Anti-Corruption at the National Security Council. For those a bit less familiar with our structure, basically the NSC plays this coordinating role across the different departments and agencies and helps us track the big picture and kind of troubleshoot as needed to keep forward progress. And in our case, we have the real blessing of having already had our U.S. strategy on countering corruption put out by the president 2 years ago. So we know our true north. We know where we're headed, and that is, as I said, a blessing because it means that we can really focus on implementing. Now, the U.S. strategy, for those who have read it, is incredibly expansive. Pretty much everything under the sun can fit in it, but there are really some themes that do emerge and bubble to the top. And so I'll try to touch on some of those and some of the kind of highlights in terms of how the interagency has been executing on this priority. And I am thrilled that I am joined by some colleagues from state and aid and elsewhere, and of course, our colleagues from Treasury who can help jump into those components. So big picture, the U.S. strategy, as I mentioned, released in December 2021, and it was really monumental in its focus on corruption as a national security threat and the kind of corresponding attention that needs to be paid to it. Now, departments and agencies are looking at how to accelerate implementation of key commitments through their own processes and hold themselves accountable. For example, the State Department released an implementation plan for the strategy a few months ago. DOJ captured relevant commitments in their current strategic plan, and USAID published its first ever anti-corruption policy, which calls on development practitioners across sectors, including health, climate, gender, look at how their work can not only avoid corruption in the places where they work by working around corrupt governments, but actually address corruption head on through more support to change agents inside and outside government. The policy also reoriented from the traditional development focus on administrative and low-level corruption and health clinics and schools and so on, to looking upstream, to looking at the grand corruption, hypocrisy, and transnational corruption that often are the root causes of that kind of corruption and service delivery. These shifts are really pretty monumental and are backed up by a slew of new programming that reflects the new direction of the U.S. strategy from both. These programs are coming from state aid, coming with partnerships from Justice, from Treasury, FBI, and many others. Some of the programs focus on the government systems that are needed to build resilience to transnational corruption and grand corruption, closing loopholes, detecting dirty money and following its flow across borders, ultimately holding corrupt actors accountable, but various kinds of government functions. Others focus on support to civil society and media, which we know, of course, are essential to this work and OGP has pioneered. For instance, a grant under State's Fiscal Transparency Innovation Fund in Bangladesh fostered collaboration between the government and civil society to support the development of a new citizen budget and increase public engagement in that process. The U.S. is also providing support at the country level and multilaterally to cultivate more law enforcement capacity and cooperation with regard to cases that have an illicit finance network. That includes seeding information exchange with Interpol, with the International Anti-Corruption Coordination Center, the OECD Law Enforcement Network. These efforts we've been hearing have been generating an uptick in the willingness of foreign law enforcement partners to reach out to each other and seek to collaborate. We're also trying to surge attention to an area in high demand from overseas partners, the recovery of stolen assets. The U.S. recently launched the Global Forum on Asset Recovery Action Series initiative in partnership with UNODC and the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative, as well as the UK and France. The goal of this action series is to strengthen practitioner coordination to advance progress on international asset recovery cases. It began in just this past July and will be convening on the margins of multilateral meetings going forward. We're also looking through our programming at how the private sector can join with activists and innovators to develop new solutions. USAID's Countering Transnational Corruption Grand Challenge is aimed at preventing corrupt actors from siphoning off critical resources that should be used for the public good by disrupting illicit finance and trafficking in commodities, strengthening transparency and accountability in global supply chains, and promoting integrity in the public and private sectors. So these kinds of instruments use our foreign assistance, our programming tools. But the magic really comes when our programming can be combined with savvy diplomacy in support of these issues. In both bilateral engagements and multilaterally, the U.S. continues to elevate anti-corruption. For instance, we are prioritizing issues related to illicit finance in the APEC Anti-Corruption and Transparency Working Group related to the Asia Pacific, including in an upcoming ministerial this November, and are continuing to bring stakeholders together in our co-leadership in the Financial Transparency and Integrity cohort. This came out of the Summit for Democracy process. And that cohort is focused on three things. One, beneficial ownership. Two, public procurement. And three, addressing the enabling industries that can perpetuate corruption. We're also coordinating with foreign partners in our continued use of financial sanctions and visa restrictions on corrupt actors for maximum impact. And we'll be engaging a range of stakeholders on illicit finance issues at the upcoming UN Convention Against Corruption Conference of States Parties, the UNCAP COP. Hopefully that's on everybody's calendar. The U.S. is president of the COP this year, and our presidency will include a real emphasis on the vital role civil society plays as key partners. I hope to see many of you in Atlanta. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention OGP. The U.S. is eager to advance our anti-corruption priorities through our new role on the Open Government Partnership Steering Committee. We look forward to working with our peers to continue prioritizing transparency and accountability as tools to curb illicit finance and combat corruption. We know that these are tools that can be used for a lot of different purposes. The U.S. presidency or the U.S. Participation in the steering committee is placing particular emphasis on the way that open government components can have impact in rooting out corruption. All of these new work streams are undergirded by a commitment to learning and adaptation. For instance, USAID has released new research and guidance products over the last couple of years, including a declassification guide on addressing entrenched corruption during windows of opportunity, and USAID's guide to countering corruption across sectors, which helps break this issue out of the democracy governance silo and think in a much more cross-sectoral way about where we can have impact. Throughout, we're looking at how to ensure that this work is institutionalized for the long term. State's Office of the Coordinator for Global Anti-Corruption has been playing a vital role in knitting together the cross-cutting team there for greater impact. This is not a role or an office that existed in previous administrations, and it is serving a really important function. USAID recently celebrated the launch of its new Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance Bureau, which includes a dedicated anti-corruption center to carry forward the work of Administrative Powers Anti-Corruption Task Force. And we're all looking at how to ensure that this issue set has the people, the resources, and the authorities it needs to have enduring impact. I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you, Abigail. Anyone have any questions or thoughts for our speaker on either of these two commitments?
Sorry, Daniel, I didn't talk about the Presidential Initiative for Democratic Renewal. I didn't know you wanted me to flip to that. So I'll mention that briefly, and then we can
No,
open it
please
up
go for it.
more broadly. Yeah, so this is even the USO 142, and this is the one that's about the the initiative that was launched at the first Summit for Democracy, Presidential Initiative for Democratic Renewal, PITR, as bureaucrats like to shorten it. And you can see here the 5 different components of it. Big picture, this is a flagship initiative that is enabling us to continue collaboration on lots and lots of different aspects of the democratic architecture globally. This spring, at the second Summit for Democracy, the U.S. announced up to $690 million in new funding for PITR through fiscal year 2024, working with Congress. This includes new initiatives focused on countering digital authoritarianism and shaping emerging technologies to ensure respect for human rights. It includes an emphasis on consolidating progress in places experiencing a democratic breakthrough, including 8 promising countries where the Development Finance Corporation has committed more than $1 billion. It includes some creative ideas like a media viability accelerator that will help independent media houses better understand their markets and their audiences and their revenue strategies, which we all know independent media is so essential to anti-corruption progress. And we also used the most recent Summit for Democracy to rally over 24 foreign partners to join us in a beneficial ownership pledge, whereby endorsees committed to enhancing beneficial ownership transparency in order to make it more difficult for corrupt actors to conceal their identities, assets, and criminal activities, really in parallel with the kind of work that we've been pursuing at Treasury that Jacob will touch on in a moment. There's other additional programs under the PITR banner that relate to anti-corruption in particular, our Democracies Against Safe Havens initiative, our global initiative to galvanize the private sector. I can get into more specifics on those, the Global Anti-Corruption Consortium, which brings together journalists and activists to collaborate more closely, and some of the flagship programs coming out of USAID. But why don't I pause just because I know there's a lot of thoughtful and smart folks on the line, and very curious to hear your ideas and to get to interact more. Thanks.
Steve, I see your hands up.
Yes, thanks. Is there a definition of corruption somewhere? I mean, certainly taking a bribe, government employee taking a bribe would be considered corruption. But what if somebody was keeping quiet as a government employee if they saw something wrong and they didn't want to jeopardize their next promotion and the boss's favorite contractor is doing something wrong? Is that employee then corrupted? I just want to know. So it'd be nice to know where the line is, or if it's all mush or gray. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So I, sleep with a copy of the U.S. strategy on countering corruption under my pillow, but unfortunately left it at the moment on my desk. I do not think that the U.S. strategy defines a single definition. This is something that we wrestled with when USAID was coming up with its anti-corruption policy. And USAID elected to put forward a definition, and it's an interesting one. And this is online. I can drop in the chat for folks. But basically, the kind of old definition that a lot of us anti-corruption nerds grew up on was the TI one, the Transparency International one, about the abuse of public power, public influence for private gain. The new USAID definition posits that corruption is the abuse of entrusted power or influence for personal or political gain. which is quite interesting because it's looking at, it's not just about getting another Rolex watch or a house in the Cayman Islands or whatever. It's also the idea that you may be pursuing corruption for the strategic advantage that your party or your country seeks. And the U.S. strategy on countering corruption talks about strategic corruption as one of these more emerging phenomena that, sometimes the bribery is not happening for personal enrichment. It's happening because a country is gaining geopolitical advantage by pursuing corruption, bribery, collusion, extortion as means of advancing their geopolitical interests as part of their foreign policy. So in terms of your question about whether inaction can be a form of corruption, I think it could be. It just depends on the context. If there's supposed to be some sort of action taken, and somebody is abusing their power by not taking that action, then I think that probably could be a form of corruption. But I think perhaps what you're talking about is also somebody could be a whistleblower because they see something problematic happening and they're electing not to be a whistleblower. And I think that does get into a bit more of a gray area because, of course, there are a lot of reasons that people may feel unsafe in blowing the whistle in various circumstances that are beyond their control. So those are some thoughts on the definitional question.
Right. Any other questions or comments?
Dan, I think worth noting that Sky put a link in the chat to the U.S. strategy on countering corruption,
Great. Thank you for
giving
that.
the examples of types of corruption.
That's Guy. He's a heck of a guy. I don't mind saying that on a recorded line. All right, Abigail, did you have more you wanted to talk about in this on Pitter? No?
That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, barring any other questions, comments, concerns, this is the point we would have talked about the State Department's commitment 131 around responsible business conduct. Like I said, unfortunately, she was unable to make it today. We will try to schedule her for a future session, but I wanted to leave this slide in here just so folks could see the current sort of publicly posted status as a part of today. All right. And with that, we're going to move right on to beneficial ownership reporting. So as we get that kicked off, and I don't know, Jacob, if you wanted to go over the poll or if you wanted me to.
You can, please take it away.
Great. All right. So Alexis, if you could kick the poll off, please. There should be a poll. There we go. Look at that. Just popped up immediately on your screen right now. Where you can answer yes or no, whether you're how aware you are, or have you heard of the this Corporate Transparency Act or beneficial ownership information reporting obligations? Looks like most folks have heard of it. No one has put they're not sure. That's remarkable, actually. All right, look at the poll, it has evened out. We got 20 responses in so far, about 3/4 of which are at least familiar with it.
And Dan, I'm not sure. I might need to end the poll for everyone else to see the results.
Oh,
not sure if
seconds
you
I
want to
couldn't
confirm
actually-
that for me or not.
All right, so let's get another maybe 10 seconds for folks to get their final votes in. All right, I think we're probably good to end a poll, Alexis. All right, so there you
Okay.
go. Actually, right at
Well, thank you all.
3/4, Jacob.
Thank you all very much. It's worth pointing out that on this call, the 75% no of either the Corporate Transparency Act by that name or beneficial ownership information reporting by that name. The National Federation of Independent Businesses did a poll of 600 small businesses in which 90% had never heard of either of those. They did that poll about 2 months ago. So the problem that FinCEN faces, because FinCEN, of course, is the unit of the Treasury Department that is tasked with implementing the beneficial ownership reporting obligation that's created under the Corporate Transparency Act, is the gulf is enormous between what we know and the people who work on these kind of things routinely know and what the world outside knows. And since the world outside is what's going to have to actually report these things, closing that gap is kind of the key thing that we have been working towards. The beneficial ownership reporting obligation becomes live on January 1st of 2024, and we are continuing to release guidance related to beneficial ownership information reporting and access to these slides that I'm going to provide are just really a sort of level setting for everybody, just for the 25% who didn't know. The CTA, of course, was enacted by Congress in 2021, and the beneficial ownership reporting requirement is, I mean, technically, in the actual language of the obligation, there is no discussion about corruption. But in the congressional findings, it's quite clear that Congress intended this to be a tool in anti-corruption activity more generally. The obligation is for reporting companies, which is a term of art under the statute and then under the regulations, but encompasses a very large percentage of the legal entities created in the United States and a much smaller percentage of the foreign legal entities that are doing business in the United States. It contains all of the foreign entities that are registered to do business under state law. But all of those entities, called reporting companies, must report basic beneficial ownership information to FinCEN starting January 1st of 2024. Could I have the next slide, please? All right. We have been focusing, as I say, recently, primarily on expanding the guidance that we are providing, and that's guidance that is intended both to educate small businesses, because, by the way, this is primarily a small business reporting obligation. Large businesses are mostly exempt from the reporting requirement. That will educate small businesses directly so that ideally they do not have to actually obtain potentially expensive legal advice or other professional advice in trying to figure out how to actually comply. But we are also providing guidance to the professionals who, if nothing else works, small businesses will go to ask for advice about what to do. We're continuing to release guidance along these two basic axes. And most recently, we've included public updates that include several informational videos that we have pushed out, answers to frequently asked questions. We've issued 3 tranches of those so far. We continue to issue them on about a monthly basis, and we will have at least 2 more, probably 3 more tranches that we will issue. Well, probably 2 more before January 1st, and at least 1 more after that. But then we anticipate continuing to issue FAQ batches of FAQs with answers every 6 months or so. And we have also testified to Congress. We have participated in a number of public meetings of one kind or another, and we have responded to invitations from a number of trade associations, such as the American Bar Association, at least the regional councils of the American Bar Association. The National Association of Secretaries of State has requested us to speak on several occasions, and we have, and a number of other similar organizations of either third-party service providers or trusted intermediaries, primarily in state government. You can find our congressional testimony. We were at a hearing, an oversight hearing of the Financial Services Committee not long ago. We have visited individual secretaries of state. There was a combined effort that was undertaken with the Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence on the subject of combating fentanyl trafficking that we piggybacked on because we were talking to officials in Ohio and in Kentucky, and we were talking with financial institutions as well, and we thought it was a useful way for us to go out and kind of amplify our message about beneficial ownership. But as you can see from this slide that I've got in front of us, this is the level at which we feel it's necessary to begin the groundwork of educating the public about the obligations, the reporting obligations of reporting companies. Very simple material, at least at the start. I mean, you can drill down on all of these questions, and our small entity compliance guide does, often in great detail, but basically trying to focus people on the big questions that they are going to have to address in deciding whether they have to report and what they have to report when they do, and how then, of course, how they report. We've been trying to build all of our messaging around this concept of, simple questions and simple questions frequently repeated. And so far, we have gotten pretty good grades from professionals, from fellow professionals. But it is certainly chastening for us to discover, as we did, when we got the comment letter from the NFIB that listed their poll, to discover how little we have actually penetrated the small business community. And so this prompts us to start thinking about a wider variety of more targeted outreach, targeted in the sense of trying to get some information about the beneficial ownership reporting obligation into the hands of people who are intermediaries that can then be distributed, directly distributed. SBA has webinars, for example. IRS can link to our beneficial ownership information page on, documents that they send out on a periodic basis. We can, we have printed up brochures, informational brochures that can then be either distributed in hard copy at, say, Secretaries of State offices, or can be uploaded electronically and posted on state websites for essentially no price. So all of these things are in contemplation, if not actually in process right now. And we are made somewhat hopeful by the understanding that for existing companies, existing reporting companies, of which there are, as best Vincent can estimate, because there's no hard numbers on these things, about 32 million existing companies, they have a whole year in which to make their first beneficial ownership report. So while we have to be able to start ingesting reports on January 1st, we can continue our outreach, and we intend to continue our outreach all through that first year at a fairly intense level, so that we can, we have the best shot at making our reporting companies aware of their obligations during the period when they are still in compliance, when their submission of the report is not a late report, but it's still an on-time report. Because one of the things that we have found in the messaging world that we are somewhat disturbed by, and we have tried to express as best we can, sort of a counter narrative. But one of the things that is easiest for people to focus on when they're trying to understand a new rule is, what are the penalties? And the penalties are what they are. We had no control over this. Congress said penalties are the basic penalties of violation of the Bank Secrecy Act, which are criminal. So that looks bad. And when people say, well, what happens if I don't do this? And we say, well, to be quite candid, what could happen is you could go to jail. We don't think that that's likely to happen, because there's a lot of things standing between simply failing to file a single report and being held criminally liable and going to jail. It's hard for us to say that and be convincing. It's easy for people to say, oh, look, there are criminal penalties, and then they get very concerned about them. Next slide. I believe the next slide is so this gives an idea of some of the things that we've been doing, and also some of the places where you can go to see some of the materials that we have produced. And then I think that there is one final slide that has wait. The one after small entity compliance guide has FinCEN's resources. And then the last one, I guess, is you guys' resources. But in any event, we've tried to consolidate all of the resources that we have issued so far and all the resources we're going to keep issuing on one web page. So that, again, to make the outreach easier, to make the distribution of these things easier, we can just say, go to fincen.gov/BOI, get all of the things that we have done with a highlight banner that shows the things that are being done that have been done most recently, so that people know kind of what's new, and what's new is fairly easy for them to see. This is, that's all the report that I had, but I'm more than happy to answer questions or discuss. I would be very interested to hear what people think about this as an outreach strategy, or if you have actually seen any of the material that we've produced, whether you think that it's useful, helpful, whether you think it could be improved on in any ways. Any feedback is of value to us.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. Opening it up to folks on the line. Feel free to come off mute or put your questions in the chat.
Right, I've stunned you into silence. It's probably that 32.6 million number.
Yeah, I've actually been bragging about your work, Jacob. We met with some international partners earlier this week, and they were very impressed with the amount of progress we've made on this front. So, as a citizen, I thank you for this work.
Well, we will see come January exactly how much progress we've really made. But thank you.
Thank you. Well, before we wrap up, we did want to do a shameless plug. So as I mentioned, this session is being recorded. The recording will be posted on open.usa.gov for future people to go and look at. We also will be having a in-person civil society event just before the conference that Abigail was talking about, the CAG. I always say it wrong. I'm sure Sky will come off mute and tell me. See, there you go.
Uncat cost. Yeah.
Uncat cost. There you go. So the in-person civil society event will be on Saturday the 9th from 3 to 5 o'clock at the Carter Center. They're the one hosting the event there in Atlanta. Due to space, they do request only one person per organization attend. The Carter Center is only so big, and if we had everyone involved in civil society show up, the fire marshal would be very unhappy with us. But if you do want to talk to us in person, we'll be there, like I said, December 9th. If you need information, do email us here at the Open Government Secretariat at gsa.gov. With that, I open up to any final last questions, comments, concerns.
Yeah.
And barring none, go ahead, Josh.
Okay. At the beginning of the presentation, you had some highlighted topics. I thought we were going to get back to the third one that stated about science integrity. I was wondering if you could elaborate what you mean by that.
Let me just hit X out here.
I think it was at the very beginning.
The highlighted ones here are all of the themes of the 5th National Action Plan.
Right.
So we're only covering the 3 highlighted themes today. We may, I need to pull up my spreadsheet.
I'd like to hear about bolstering trust in government through scientific integrity and evidence-based policymaking. Where can I find more on that thing? Oh, in the NPA overview, right?
I can show you exactly where to find that. So if you go to open.usa.gov.
Could you put the link in the thing?
I will indeed. I'm gonna get you a more exact link in just a moment, rather than a general link.
I think whatever you're writing on that's probably flawed. That's how they're getting away with the corruption that I'm witnessing, is they claim it to be scientific, but even though there's hundreds of scholared geneticists that oppose it, and they realize that even in their EIS and their environmental impact statement, it says that it's going to be transgenetic and it will change the biosphere. However, they don't expect a lot of people to be using this technology.
So Josh, here's the fifth national action plan. I've put a link in the chat directly to commitment 132, which is 132.1, 132.2. And these are the offices that are in charge of those specific commitments, as well as some links as to what they're doing within those open government commitments.
Is it too late to make comment on those aspects?
So no, I guess is the short answer. And I was just looking up whether we already had a session on those or not, and then I got distracted away.
I like the knowledge. I would like to stop the government in the corruption acts like you guys state.
So 132 was going to be a topic for our next session. We're still trying to schedule that for our group 3 session. So be on the lookout for our emails that come out as we get that scheduled and organized.
I don't have a lot to say, but trust me, I'll be there.
Absolutely. Well, we do appreciate everyone's time. Any other walk-ons before we wrap this up?
Dan,
Yes.
Steve Buckley did put a question in the chat.
Oh, sorry.
Are you able to see that, or would you like me to read it?
Yes, I guess is the short answer to both questions.
I will read it. So he is asking, the Carter Center says that they will allow for representatives from any relevant civil society org. Should we assume that means any civil society org, or are there any organizations that are not relevant per their definition?
That's a great question, Stephen. And I can ask Carter Center to clarify that. What we were really hoping to use that opportunity to talk to U.S. focused civil society members or organizations. So there's a lot of organizations out there that focus externally to other parts of the world. They do a lot of great work, the Carter Center included. But we were hoping to talk about our U.S. domestic policy and agenda for open government, the Fifth National Action Plan, the U.S. Multi-Stakeholder Forum, et cetera. And so really those domestic U.S. focus NGOs, civil society organizations are the ones we were hoping to seat there. Hopefully that at least dodged your question, if not answered it directly.
And then we had one more question that was put in the Q&A, just asking again the date of the event. So it is Saturday, December 9th. And then Zoe has her hand raised.
Go for it, Zoe.
Just quickly, well, 2 questions. Do you have a sense of how many of the more domestically focused NGOs are going to the UNCAC? I know Pogo's not going, but it would be, and if is there any chance for those who are not attending the UNCAC to join the Carter Center event virtually?
Not virtually. It is an in-person event, this specific one, but it'll be the first of many public sessions or listening sessions, we're calling them, to talk about all of the above, right? The Fifth National Action Plan, the setting up or revitalizing the U.S. Multi-Stakeholder Forum and getting recommendations. I can't say that word recommendations because that means FACA. Hearing the public's thoughts on the revitalizing the U.S. Domestic Multi-Stakeholder Forum, and then any ideas and thoughts or themes in terms of the Sixth National Action Plan that we're just beginning to think about. So it will be in person only, focused on whether or not you're actually attending the larger event, the conference itself in Atlanta. But we did try to, for folks who are already going to be there, hopefully make it easier for them to participate. We're sort of piggybacking on their event as opposed to holding our own, if that makes sense. Anything else in the chat, or anyone else want to come off mute?
That looks to be it for the moment in the chat.
Wonderful. All right. Well, with that, I wish everyone a great day. Thank you for attending today, and do be on the lookout for additional events in the future. Thank you so much. Bye, y'all.